Hi, everybody. I'm Nate Wiggum. I'm with Ian Capital. We do commercial real estate capital advisory, debt and equity placement across all property types all over the country. And I'm here with Adam Greenfader.
Thanks, Nate. Adam Greenfader here, managing partner of AG&T. We are real estate developers and advisors. We focus on residential and hotel properties in the Caribbean, Latin America, and Puerto Rico.
So today we're going to talk about Puerto Rico, but specifically in the context of bringing back critical manufacturing to the U.S. and how Puerto Rico traditionally has fit into that equation and what the opportunity around that really is today. But before we even get into that, we're going to talk a little bit about what exactly is Puerto Rico, the history of the island, some of the tax-related incentives and special treatment that the island receives with regards to its special status, which we're going to go into a little bit of detail. So I think we have a lot of interesting stuff here to cover today. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about what Puerto Rico is. And Adam, you have a really long history and relationship with Puerto Rico. So why don't you start us off and just give us a quick overview of really what is the island? What is its status?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate being here with you today, Nate. We're living in really historic times, for the world, for America, and for Puerto Rico. And it really seems that this COVID-19 crisis has, in a matter of 90 days, changed everything that we thought was important and kind of rearranged the whole biopharma safety industry and brought Puerto Rico kind of back into the headline. Puerto Rico, as everybody should know, is a part of the United States. It's a U.S. territory just off the coast of Florida, about 1,000 miles southeast of Florida. I always like to say less than a 3-hour flight, very easy to get to.
Right. So today that Puerto Rico has about a little under 3.5 million people. It's a beautifully diverse island. There's different ecosystems all over it. It has the only tropical rainforest in the U.S. called El Yunque, which is a national park. There's just an amazing diversity of ecology, biosystems, and really nature to see here on the island.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I lived for 20 years on the beach in Ocean Park, and probably one of the nicest metropolitan beaches in the world for that matter. And we had a bunch of Airbnbs and got to meet tourists week in, week out, and they would go to the bioluminescent bay or the rainforest or Old San Juan, which is the only historic old city in the United States, built in the 1500s. So it's Puerto Rico from a just sheer beauty perspective is incredible and always surprises visitors when they come.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I've been here for a little over a year now, and walking around the old city is it's such just an amazing experience because you really can feel the history that was there. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been up there near the old fort called El Morro, looking out at where the kind of the cannon banks are, looking over the ocean and just kind of thinking 400 years ago, there was probably a Spanish soldier in full metal armor standing there while guns are firing at ships, with big sails on the ocean, just like something out of a movie and all that. And it's amazing to be there. You really can feel that there.
Yeah, just, Puerto Rico has really been probably the most misunderstood place in the world. It seems that there's some common misperceptions about Puerto Rico. And I think the first one is the name. When you tell people Puerto Rico, a lot of people think, hey, is that Costa Rica or is San Juan San Jose? So, I think that if Puerto Rico could change its name, it would already be, leaps and bounds, further along in terms of, fighting these misperceptions. But the greatest misperception about Puerto Rico really comes back to the 1950s, this West Side Story syndrome. There were the gangs and the violence, and Puerto Rico today is a really safe place to be and a safe place to live, but it just seems to have this stigma, this West Side Story stigma that never seemed to disappear. And I always tell people with 3.5 million people or so on the island, it's like living in any major metropolitan city. You just lock your doors and make sure you don't leave anything in your car, but that's really it. I mean, besides that, it's a very safe place. I would say that is probably one of the big misconceptions of Puerto Rico.
I totally agree. I mean, I moved here from Los Angeles where I'd lived for 15 years, and in the last 10 of which I lived in Hollywood, and even kind of a nicer part of Hollywood, and I feel safer here. Frankly, I mean, compared to being there. Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned Costa Rica, when I was moving here and I told my sister I was moving here, she actually said, like, wait, you're leaving the country, you're going to Costa Rica? And I was like, no, I'm going to Puerto Rico, part of America. And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. So
Yeah. The other thing about Puerto Rico is that once people figure out that it's part of America, then the other big thing is everyone's really surprised about how much English is spoken. I mean, everywhere in Puerto Rico, people speak English. There's Walgreens, CVS, your telephone works, your ATM works. I mean, it's like being in a state in the United States on one side, and then you do have the cultural side, side as well. So it's got this really nice mix, but you don't have to speak Spanish. I know people that have lived for 30 years in Puerto Rico and only speak a handful of words.
I totally agree. In fact, so I can get by with a little Spanish, but I definitely wouldn't say I'm fluent. But my intention coming here, one of my intentions was, I'm going to be in Puerto Rico. I'm going to really study up on Spanish, get tight, all that stuff. I've been so negligent on that because virtually everyone here speaks English. Anyone who's in any kind of a business context absolutely speaks English. Almost everyone speaks English. I'm kind of frankly ashamed to admit that I've neglected my studies because I frankly haven't had any need or motivation to work on it. So my Spanish probably hasn't improved at all since being here.
Yeah. We moved our operations about 5 years ago to Miami. And I always joke with my friends saying I speak more Spanish in Miami than I did when I was in Puerto Rico. In Miami, people will actually come up to me and speak to me in Spanish first. Whereas where I'm on the streets in San Juan, they're usually speaking to me in English first. So it's a crazy misconception, but important. And I think that the other thing about Puerto Rico that is always very surprising for people who come for the first time is this quality of the infrastructure. A lot of people thought that after Hurricane Maria and Irma that the island was completely destroyed. But when people land at the airport and they see the amazing modern airport and the roads and the streets and the fact that everything works like in the U.S. And that it hasn't been totally destroyed is also another really big misconception that, I don't know why it exists, but that's how it is for the moment.
Yeah, my internet speed here in San Juan, kind of right near Ocean Park, where I used to live, I have fiber right to my apartment here. My internet, I think, is about a gigabit a second, more than 10 times faster than the maximum speed I could have gotten where I moved from in Hollywood. So when we're talking about these misconceptions, we've hit on a few. One that we have here about not having beautiful beaches is kind of the same thing. I think people have this weird image of the island for whatever reason, but as we were mentioned before, there's this amazing diversity of ecology and just amount of beauty and nature here. The staggering quality of beaches here in many parts of the island is, I would say, world class. I mean, I think Flamingo Beach on Culebra is one of the prettiest beaches, considered to be one of the prettiest beaches in the entire Caribbean.
Yeah, it's really been by design, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. But Puerto Rico was never designed to be a tourist destination. Unlike the majority of islands in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico's economy is basically manufacturing based, which means that it never had to sell tourism and the beautiful beaches and the wonderful ecosystem because it could generate revenues from other sources. But that, having said that, it doesn't take away from the incredible beauty of the beaches and, and the flora and the fauna that the island has to offer.
Yeah, I agree. So the last on the list we have here is really more, it says not really America, but it's almost, I think, more of a question of, we know Puerto Rico is America. We know it's not a state, something in the middle.
So Puerto Rico is an American territory. Officially, it's called a Commonwealth, but for all intents and purposes, Puerto Rico is America. All Puerto Ricans are American citizens. All Puerto Ricans have a U.S. passport. In Puerto Rico, we use the dollar. Federal courts, all of the U.S. federal courts are in Puerto Rico. The Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, they're all in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is part of the United States. It always has been and hopefully will always be a part of the United States.
Right. So to put that really in context of if Puerto Rico was a state, and I kind of only recently really found this out and it really just put Puerto Rico in perspective to me with regards to both the size of the population and how that compares to a lot of other states, and almost, I would say, more importantly, the size of the economy. So, like we show here, Puerto Rico was a state, it would be the 31st largest state by population. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this presentation. Hope it was informative. If you're interested in learning more about the opportunities in Puerto Rico, of which there are many, feel free to reach out to either one of us There's a link below to go to our website to download a copy of the presentation as well.